Welcome to the Rankings Podcast, where we feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and elite personal injury attorneys and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Chris Stryer here, president and founder of Rankings.io, where we help elite personal injury attorneys dominate first-page rankings. You're listening to the Rankings Podcast, where I feature innovative business owners and, of course, elite personal injury attorneys. I'm excited to have Saul Weiss on the show today. Saul Weiss is a shareholder of Anapol Weiss, a national leader in personal injury, product liability, and pharmaceutical litigation. He has successfully litigated thousands of cases in state and federal courts. Saul has played crucial roles in high-profile national lawsuits, including the National Football League Players' Concussion Injury litigation, the FinFin Dietary Supplement case, and many more. He was named 2014 Lawyer of the Year in Mass Tort and Class Action Litigation by Philadelphia's Best Lawyers and has been named to the Best Lawyers since 2006. He is an active member of the Board of Consultors of Villanova University School of Law. Saul, welcome to the show.
Good to be here. How you doing?
I'm really excited to have you. So let's kick things off. Let's take me back to the beginning of Anapol Weiss. How did you get started? Where did your journey start there?
My journey started in 1972 when I graduated from Villanova Law School. My first job was at a law firm that had about 24 lawyers at that time. And I was hired to do plaintiff's antitrust work. And 4 years into that job, the person I worked with, Paul Anapol, started his own firm. And it's been some iteration of Anapol Weiss or Anapol Schwartz, whatever you want to call it, since 1977.
Gotcha. So take me back to the early days when you joined Paul. What was it like, getting your feet on the ground, hustling to get those cases? I know you've been practicing law, so maybe you already had a book of business when you started, so it wasn't.
No, I was right out of law school, and I was assigned to handle one big case, a price-fixing case. Mm-hmm. And I was up against a very prominent white shoe Philadelphia law firm. And I spent the first year and a half of my legal career working day and night, 6 days a week, until we got that case resolved. Paul was a personal injury lawyer as well. He was a president of the Philadelphia Trial Lawyers Association, tried a lot of really catastrophically injured people cases. And after that stint doing antitrust work, I also started doing product liability work with Paul.
Gotcha. So some of those was one of the big turning points in the firm, settling some of those big cases. Did that kind of give you the cash power to kind of take the marketing up to the next level? Would you say that's fair? Or
that's pretty fair. I've been fortunate. I've worked on large cases all my life. I've had my share of some smaller cases, but in the main, I have done work involving severely compromised people, and I've also have done some business litigation for small businesses, all on the plaintiff side.
Yeah, and one really high-profile case we got to talk about is the concussion case with the NFL. So tell me a little bit about that. How did you get into that unique type of litigation?
My partner in Arizona, Larry Coben, who I went to high school with, he called me up and said, "I'd like to work with you guys." We worked out a deal. And within about 6 months of being in our firm, albeit in Scottsdale, he looked at a bunch of football players who had exhibited some neurological problems, severe problems. Larry has tried a number of cases against helmet manufacturers, football, horse racing, hockey, and bicycle accidents. And at the time, one of my partners, Ned Ehrlich, was representing injured football players for workers' comp claims in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York. So it was a natural fit. We hired some really top flight experts, and away we went. We filed the first class action in federal court. We were instrumental in getting it multi-district litigation, JPML, and it was assigned to Judge Brody, who had our case, and I was one of two co-lead counsel for the plaintiff side.
Yeah, and that really got a ton of media exposure, and I'm sure that, you know, that really, that natural kind of PR that you get, it helps the marketing initiatives, it helps with the social proof. And
well, it does all that, Chris. We hired a PR firm that is the leads in the concussion case, including the steering committee. And we followed their recommendation. And early on, we decided it was best to have it all be about the players, not about the lawyers.
Right.
So we had about 10 or 12 players whose life stories were constantly in the media, and it mushroomed from there.
Yeah, and absolutely. And going from there, then you've been involved in many other major cases. Let's talk about FinFin. How did you get into the pharmaceutical litigation space?
In, I'm going to say, the early 90s, we had a client who lost his hearing. He was given a drug that caused it at the VA administration, so we filed a tort claim action. And after about 3 years, it was successful. We got a lot of money for the client. FinFin started in 1998, I'm thinking, 1997. By 1999, the whole country was awash with FinFin litigation. In my initial role, I was very active in medical monitoring cases in the state of Pennsylvania and New Jersey. At some point in time, we joined forces with the MDL plaintiffs, and I became one of 7 class counsel. And I spent the next more than 4 or 5 years. We had a nice settlement, $3.4 billion against American Home Products. And then there was a whole bunch of opt-outs, and I was very active for many years in that litigation.
Yeah, so it's definitely not. You hear that he was an overnight success. No, it was many years that you were involved in this. It was many prior cases that gave you the skills to try this case and get the settlement that you acquired. Could you give our listeners are mostly personal injury attorneys looking to grow their practice. What are some general steps or tips that you would give those attorneys on trying cases to get maximum value?
The first thing that I would tell young lawyers, you need to work up the damages. A lot of time, lawyers get focused only on liability, but it's the unique the unique situation of your client that is very compelling, and that maximizes the recovery you can make for a client in front of a jury. It's pretty important up front. Second thing is you have to work like a dog. And most of these cases take 2 or 3 years before they get resolved. We can spend anywhere between $75,000 and $200,000 in costs in a big case. lining up the right experts, flying all over the country or sometimes to Europe, wherever, to take the necessary depositions of the corporate employees. And that's what we do.
Thank you for that. Yeah. And that's, when you tell that story and you get that emotional reaction from the jury, I'm sure that has a huge impact. I'm not an attorney myself, but I see that and I understand that component of it too. In terms of, let's take it on the other side. You've now tried a lot of cases. What about some of the mistakes that you've learned from? What are some that stand out that you could pass on, and those mistakes? What are some of those mistakes that you've learned from trying many cases?
The most important thing I learned is you have to have a simple story. You have to get rid of all the irrelevant stuff. I've trained with some really good trial masters. Some of them are psychologists. Some of them are trial lawyers. It's all about the storytelling. And you've got to be very highly focused on what's the most important aspect in your case. And the other thing you have to do, you have to talk in plain English.
Yeah, I run into that mistake myself, being a search engine optimization guy, a big SEO nerd. And I think, you know what, I need to bring this back and not get in the weeds a little bit so that we're talking the same language. Talking about those mentors and those peers, I think of other, I've heard Mark Lanier speak. I talked to John Gomez and some of these top litigators. Who are some of those mentors that helped you develop your expertise?
Well, I spent a fair amount of time over the years working with Rodney Jew in California. It's a week-long course for each case. You spend the first couple days constructing the defense, which seems an odd thing to do, but it's really not. It's the appropriate thing to do. And then you spend a day trying to rebut that defense, and then you spend the last 2 days refining your case in chief. And when you do that, you get rid of a lot of things that are really irrelevant and confuse a jury, because there are 8 or 12 people. They know very little about what you're about to tell them, and they're not going to remember a whole bunch of stuff. So you got to be very careful.
Absolutely. And by looking at the defense side, it helps you look at how you're going to play offense and attack what they might be setting up as their defense.
Now, the most important thing for a lawyer is credibility. You need to establish credibility with the jury from the time you start picking a jury until the time you close. And that's why you have to be very tight in the facts you present, and you can't stretch.
Absolutely. I think that's very important. And I think we could talk about that in a lot of detail in regards to how to make those stories more simplified and what you could discard and what needs to stay. And that's a unique skill set of its own there. Today, what are your high value activities? How are you bringing the most impact or value to the firm today?
I like to break down a case when it first comes in. I develop a theme. I figure out what I need to do to effectively persuade the jury or a fact finder or a corporate representative who's a decision maker, to get them to understand how profoundly injured my clients are. For example, before I started with the NFL concussion case, I was also involved in the Kids for Cash case in Luzerne County. They were 2 corrupt common pleas court judges who were taking kickbacks and bribes from a developer and owners of a private prison. And the judges would send these kids to the prison, normally before they even were sentenced or whatever, adjudicated as a juvenile. And they were getting paid per kid that went into the jail. It took a long time to unravel all those facts. We were deterred for quite some time because the FBI had a criminal investigation. But eventually we were able to get a settlement against a developer who actually made substantial kickbacks to two judges, the private prison company, and a lawyer who was also an owner of the private prison. So I must have used 7-8 years of my time, and we were able to get a civil rights recovery for, I'm trying to remember, maybe 2,000 kids.
That's incredible. And when you're telling me this story, Saul, I'm a big fan of the TV show Suits. And I feel like they took your exact case and made it into a season. Have you seen that? Have you seen that episode of Suits?
No, but there was a movie made called Cash for Kids.
Okay.
We had the Juvenile Law Center, who's a Marsha Levick was the director, still the director, and she's an amazing advocate for juvenile rights. She has argued a number of cases in front of the Supreme Court of the United States. And we worked with her and another law firm to get justice for these kids.
Absolutely.
Very to do. It's very satisfying.
Yeah, that's
what to do.
Yeah, that's where that was my next question. Obviously, spending that much time on a case, obviously it's work, but to some degree you have to have a passion and really care to put that much time and energy into this effort. So, that
my mantra is I like to change people's lives. I like to give them a fair shot. I want them to spend the rest of their life not worrying about where the next dollar is coming from or how they're going to get medical treatment.
Yeah, that's incredible. And that's what I think any consumer that's looking to hire an attorney, hire an expert, that's what they're looking for. Someone that really cares and that they can trust is going to put their, best energies and efforts into the case. And also just having your prior successes, that speaks volume because, people can talk about how good they are, but when other people talk about how good you are and you have these results, like you've made these impacts, it really is a differentiator.
See, when we set out to do the concussion cases, the public opinion was very much against the players because the public thought that they were rich kids, had a privileged life, and that they knew what they signed up for. It wasn't until we were able, through public relations, by telling the stories of some of these players and their families, that the public perception changed. And I guess about a year and a half into the litigation, ESPN did some surveys and they found that 70% of people thought that the players were entitled to get compensated because they had no idea about the dangers of concussions and sub-concussions hits. And it wasn't just football. Girls soccer. Girls shouldn't hit a soccer ball. The forces that hit their head and neck are too great. Their bodies aren't mature. Field hockey for girls. Ice hockey for men. every contact sport had risks that the players didn't appreciate, didn't understand. It was the media outlets that explained to parents and participants about the dangers of neurological deficits from concussions. That was the main benefit of the NFL litigation, all the way down to Pee Wee football and Pee Wee baseball.
So many things have changed. I've seen, softball players playing third base with a helmet on. I've seen, the pitchers wear helmets. You saw Antonio Brown complaining about his helmet last year, and it's just had a profound impact, and it's really set this precedent. And I would imagine if ESPN polled the audience at the very beginning, it wouldn't have been 70% in favor.
It was not. I can tell you, we had those polls. The other thing about what I do for young lawyers, I love what I do. I like that I can change the world. And that's what litigation does. If there's some bad practices and you force a trial, or you force a defendant to rethink what they do, you make the world a safer place.
Absolutely. And there's not many careers that can do that and have that big of an impact and that domino type effect.
Correct. You also get to meet a lot of great people over the years. Some very interesting people on both sides of the aisle.
So let's talk about today. Let's talk about the firm. So how are you positioning the firm for growth today? You've had these amazing cases. You utilize the PR company very successfully to kind of change perception and to make these changes in the landscape and to really impact positive good and lives. So how are you positioning the firm for growth today?
I like to train young lawyers, and we'd like to grow from within. And we give our lawyers a lot of experience. And the culture in the firm is such that lawyers want to do a good job. We're very vigilant in making sure that we keep our clients well aware of what's going on in every stage of their case. And we're all over the country on a lot of different cases.
Yeah, and that transparency is really important. And I like the nurturing component as opposed to, I hear a lot of attorneys they have these different hiring, processes, but when you're building within, you get to develop these individuals for, and train them yourselves and how you want to practice law and how you, with your own history and experiences.
So the latest thing that we've done, I've started a fellowship at Villanova Law School for a graduating senior to work at the firm for 10 months. It's on a different track than being associate, and they're going to get to go see all the national kind of stuff we do, the leadership meetings, learn how to put a case together, and they'll do some writing, a lot of writing. At the end of that time, they'll probably be offered a job.
Yeah, that's great. And then you get to see, if they have the chop, so to speak, and if they can put in the effort and make it to the next level.
Correct. So that's the latest thing we're doing.
I like that. So it makes me think, and I had this story I told on a different conversation. It's, going back to the NFL, let's just use NFL. So you got your offense and defense, but then you have your special teams. Those individuals are practicing going to work, and, eventually a slot will open up for offense or defense, and you can pull someone from special teams, and it's not just, kind of rolling the dice, no matter how good your processes are, how good your personality assessments are in the hiring phase. It's if you already know these individuals, you know their capabilities.
That's correct. And the other thing we constantly work on is our IT department. We spend a lot of time and money on case management software, customizing it, on trial preparation products. And by keeping ahead of the curve, we have our lawyers spend more time being lawyers than doing the mundane things that some paralegals in our firm can do.
Yeah, and that case management software, I've had Litify on. I've talked to the guys from FileVine. Having a good case management software, it lends itself to, again, what you mentioned earlier, transparency. Transparency where the case is at. It has all the information in it. Lends itself to good processes. So it's incredibly important.
Yeah, we are moving into Litify.
Got it. Yeah, I just talked to those guys earlier. Saul, so, one final question here. Do you have any advice for your fellow lawyers trying to grow a large, successful practice? It's kind of a loaded question there.
No, it's not a loaded question. It's actually a very good question, Chris. The most important thing for a lawyer is his or her reputation. If you earn your stripes, the clients will follow. I guarantee you. And so
I would agree that those referrals would come in too when you earn your stripes. Would that be fair?
That's very fair. That's a good point.
Guys, we've been talking to Saul Weiss, shareholder of Anapol Weiss, a national leader in personal injury, product liability, and pharmaceutical litigation. Saul, where can people go to learn more?
They can go to www.anapolweiss.com.
Okay.
They can look in some social media. There's a whole bunch of clips about what we do and the special areas we practice in.
Awesome. And guys, we'll link up Anapol Weiss. We'll link up the social media sites, and we'll put that all over social media, make it really easy for you guys. And Saul, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for the opportunity to share some of my thoughts. And I hope some lawyers get a benefit from what we just discussed. Have a good day.
Absolutely. You too.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Rankings Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.